In this video, we will discuss the correct symbols to use for the population mean and the sample mean. We will learn the distinction between population parameters and sample statistics. We will show how to calculate the mean for a data set, and we will learn how to appropriately use the general rounding rule and the rounding rule for the mean. A statistic is a characteristic or measure obtained by using the data values from a sample. A parameter is a characteristic or measure obtained by using all of the data values from a specific population. The mean, also known as the arithmetic average, is found by adding all of the data values in a data set and dividing by the total number of values. When we calculate a mean associated with a sample, we would use the symbol x bar to represent the sample mean. In this formula, we have the uppercase Greek sigma symbol, which is the symbol for summation. So the first step will be to add up all of the data values associated with the variable, and we'll use this letter x to represent those data values. The next step will be to divide that sum by the size of the data set, and we're using the lowercase letter n to represent the sample size. Whenever we calculate the population mean, we would use the Greek symbol mu to represent the population mean. Note that the numerator for this calculation is similar. We're going to add up all of the data values associated with that variable. And then when we divide, we'll divide by the size of the data set, but this time the uppercase N has been used to represent the population size. It is of maximum importance that we are able to quickly and appropriately distinguish between sample statistics and population parameters through the correct use of symbolism. According to the World Wildlife Fund, the orangutan is an endangered species. However, there are an estimated 41,000 orangutans remaining in the world today. Observing 41,000 orangutans would be prohibitive in a number of ways. So if we wanted to calculate the mean of a variable associated with the orangutan, we would utilize a technique for obtaining a random sample and then calculate a sample mean. Then we would report that sample mean correctly as x bar. Also, according to the World Wildlife Fund, there are only 60 remaining members of the Javan rhino species in the world. They are all found in the Ujung Kulon National Park in Java, Indonesia. So with adequate resources, it is conceivable that we would be able to observe all 60 members of this species. So if we calculated a mean for a variable associated with all 60 members of this species, we would be calculating a population mean. So we would then use the symbol mu to report this population mean. In the following example, we will show how to correctly calculate the mean for a data set. Consider the following list of sample data. Since this is a sample, when we calculate a measure associated with this sample, it will be a sample statistic. And since it is the mean that we will be calculating this time, we will report it as x bar. Recall that that calculation is performed first by adding up all of the data values in the data set and then dividing by the size of the data set. So we will begin by adding up all of the data values that we find in this sample, and then we will divide that sum by the sample size, which is 9 this time. And when we perform this calculation, we wind up with 31.4 repeating. Now, the general rounding rule states that we should not do any rounding at all until the final calculation has been made. The rounding rule for the mean says that we should round to one more decimal place than occurs in the raw data. So looking at these data, we see that all of these data values have whole number significance. So in other words, the measurement precision for whatever this variable was would be whole numbers. So we would round then to one more decimal place than occurs in that raw data. So we would state then that the sample mean for this data set would be 31.4. In the next example, we will discuss the population mean. The following list of data gives the ages of all U.S. senators rounded to the nearest year as of February 3rd, 2016. Since this data set represents all of the U.S. senators at that point in time, when we calculate a measure associated with these data values, we would be calculating a population parameter. And in this case, we're going to calculate a mean, and then that mean would be reported correctly as mu. The actual calculation for the population mean will be the same as it was for the sample mean. We will simply add up all of the data values and then this time divide by the population size. And when we do that, our population mean turns out to be 62.2 years. So on February 3rd, 2016, the average age of all of the U.S. senators was 62.2 years old. In this video, we learned to distinguish between a population parameter and a sample statistic. We learned to correctly utilize the symbols for the sample mean and population mean. We learned how to successfully calculate the mean for a data set. And we learned how to round the mean to the appropriate decimal place.